So my wife and I were out doing a little bit of shopping the other day, and as we were walking around the store, I couldn't help but notice the audio system inside the store, which kind of got me thinking about how they're set up. And for the most part, store to store, the same general concept is there. You're going to have an audio source, whether it be like an iPad or a computer, or maybe the store has a dedicated music system, and that's going to be sent to an amplifier to boost the signal so that you can then send it out to the speaker array system that is embedded in the ceiling. And one of the great things about this is as you traverse from one side of the store to the other, you kind of get a seamless audio experience. Now, if you really start to pay attention, though, you can pinpoint where the individual speakers are. As you walk around like clothing racks and things like that, you're going to get some of the occlusion. And so I wanted to try and build that exact same scenario inside Unreal Engine. So if we take a look here in the engine, I have this shopping mall set up. This was an asset pack that I pulled off the marketplace. I did not build this. But basically what I want to do is I want the player, as they're in this long corridor, to hear one piece of music seamlessly. And if they were to walk into one of these stores, they would hear a different piece of music. And typically in a scenario like this, if you're just trying to fill a space with audio inside Unreal Engine, you're going to use probably the audio volumes. So if the player is inside the volume, they hear it. If they're outside of the volume, they don't. And while that's great for performance, we kind of lose a little bit in the immersiveness of the overall scene or the overall environment. And so I wanted to try and find a way that we could get just a space full of audio while also getting a lot of the immersive details, such as the attenuation and the occlusion. So instead of using audio volumes, we're actually going to be using the audio bus. So if we take a look at my content browser, I've got 9 pieces of audio. These are all just loops that I've created, and I have already inside Pro Tools given them an EQ curve to make them sound like they're coming from a speaker. That's something you can do inside the MetaSound if you wish, but just to make things a little easier, I went ahead and did it in the DAW. And so I've got one piece of music here for my hallway, and then I've got one for each of my stores. And I do have a folder here for audio buses. It is currently empty, so let's go ahead and fill it. And we're going to search for audio bus. And I'm just going to call this AB underscore hallway. And we don't have to do anything inside of this. It's by default set to mono, which is exactly what we want. So we can just save that and close it. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And then this one, I'm going to call store underscore 01. And since I named it with the underscore 01, if I duplicate this out, it'll automatically grab that naming convention. And now we already have all of our audio buses for our hallway and all 8 of our stores. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we don't need to do anything inside any of these audio buses. Now back over in our music folder, I'm going to go ahead and right click here, and I'm going to create a MetaSound source. And I'm going to call this MetaSound source underscore music player. The names here don't really matter. You can name them whatever you want. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and we're going to delete this one-shot interface since I'm using looping audio files. And we can move our output out of the way because we're not going to be using it. And I'm going to create a wave player, and we want a mono. And since I am using a loop, I'll go ahead and tick this. And we want to run this out to an audio bus writer. We're going to select the audio bus writer 1 because we're working with a mono source. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this 8 more times. So scrolling back up here to the top, so we don't have to keep dragging this down. I mean, you can connect your input to each of the plays, but you can also just come down here from the on play of the previous wave player, and that will hopefully kind of save you a little bit of dragging. Now, one of the downsides is, while we may create some fun and awesome things, the path to get there sometimes can be tedious. And this is just one of those tedious processes. So we've got all our wave players connected, and now we need to add our buses. So this first one's going to be our hallway, then store 1, store 2, and you get the idea. We're just going to go down here and get all of these connected. And so now that we have all of our wave players going to their correct audio bus, now we need to add all of the audio assets. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out of the way just so I can drag them in. So like I mentioned, the first one is going to be our hallway. And again, we repeat the tediousness of setting each of these wave players up individually. All right, so we've got 9 wave players, and they're being auto activated when this plays, and as they play, they're all being sent out to their corresponding audio buses. And so now we need to create MetaSounds for these audio buses to be received on. We can go ahead and save that and close it. And now inside of our content browser, I'm going to go ahead and right click again, and we're going to look for another MetaSound source. And I'm going to call this MSS underscore receiver underscore hallway. And again, we can delete that one-shot interface. And this time, we don't need to connect our on play to anything. All this does is activate the MetaSound. So we're going to get an audio bus reader. And we can select that to our hallway. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to come into our source, and you can keep this as the virtualization mode as restart. That's totally fine, and in fact is preferred. But now what we need to do is we need to create the sound attenuation. So I go into my audio folder here, and I'm just going to call this att underscore store, because we're actually going to be using the exact same attenuation for every single speaker that we have. So if I save this and move these back out of the way. Now in our content browser, go ahead and pull one of our receivers in here. And I'm going to open up this attenuation, and what I'm going to do is the first thing that I want to do is under attenuation shape, I'm going to change this to a cone. And under our occlusion, we want to enable it. And just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to change this to 5,000 hertz. This number is completely arbitrary, so, change it to whatever your project is. But I'm going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to be messing with the cone radius, the cone angle, and the cone fall off. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I'm going to move this off the screen, because what's more important is that you see exactly what's happening here. So this big yellow line coming out from our audio receiver here, we want to go ahead and rotate that down and move it up to about where the speaker would be. And so now, if I change the cone angle, you'll see that that cone starts to grow. And the cone angle is anything outside of this, the audio will be 0. Anything inside will be max volume. But if we change our cone fall off angle, you'll see that we now get this secondary cone that kind of spreads out. And so now anything outside of this cone is 0, depending on where you're at between the outer cone and the inner cone will be a float value of gain applied to that audio source. And then anything inside of it will be full volume. And so you're probably going to have to play around with those settings to get it to match up with what exactly it is that you're trying to do. And we can see the bottom of the cone. So that's going to be our cone radius. And I'm just going to go ahead and push that through the floor. And now I'm just going to start by moving this into the first position. Now in this asset pack, there aren't actually speakers in the ceiling. So I'm going to use lights to kind of line it up. But basically what we want to do is we want to, and you can hold the Alt key to duplicate. We're just going to start dragging these out and start to basically fill up the entire space. And for me personally, I found that it's sometimes a little easier if I just go into top-down mode. And now I can start dragging these out. And I'm just going to fill up the entire corridor. Now I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this. You'll still see the entire filling of the space, but I don't want to make you guys sit through all of that. So now, as you can see, we have all of our hallway receivers in here. And I mean, realistically, there wouldn't be speakers here, but we just want to fill the space. And looking at my outliner here, it looks like I've got 66 of these total. And so now what we need to do is drag in our music player, and you can put this anywhere because it doesn't have any attenuation applied to it. I'll go ahead and save this and start. And so now as I move around this area, you can hear that music follows. Now we do get some dead zones, and basically what we need to do is just fine tune our attenuation settings. Go ahead and that up and bring our cone radius down again. And you may have to play with this a few times just to get it right. But the good thing about all of these having the exact same attenuation setting is we only have to change that attenuation setting once. We don't have to go through for each individual one and change it. And so you can hear that, we do still get audio throughout our entire journey down this corridor. It's completely synchronized because we only have one actual audio source and everything else is going through a bus. And you can hear that now also as we enter a store, we don't hear that music. And we could probably hear it if we get close to the wall. But because we have that occlusion setting, we're getting some of that high frequency roll off as if it were coming through a wall. And so now what I need to do is inside store number 1, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing that I did with our hallway receiver. And so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the hallway out. And I'm going to call this, just like we did with our actual MetaSounds, I'm going to call this store_01. And we will need to come in here because I copied this with it already having the bus or the hallway. So I'm going to switch that to store. But since we already had the attenuation in there, we don't need to worry about adding that. And I'm going to go ahead and now duplicate this out until we have one for all 8 of our stores. And so we will need to come in here and change our bus. And so we're now on store 2. So we'll change that to store 2. Store 3, and again, you get the idea. This is once again some of the tediousness that goes along with this. And depending on how many different places you're sending this, the more work that you're going to have to do. It's going to be 7, and now we have 8. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that back out. We're going to save them. And I can also drag this out of the way. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull in. This is our receiver for store 1. And the only thing you should really have to do with this is position. So we're going to go ahead and rotate this down 90 degrees. And then we just need to place it. So we'll go ahead again and just try to spread these out to make sure we're getting full coverage. And I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this part as well. All right, so now we have all of our receivers, which are essentially speakers inside of this store. And again, because in store 1, we have it going to this bus versus the hallway, where we have that going to the hallway bus. It's now going to be reading the correct output of that MetaSound that we created. So I'll go ahead and hit play. And we've got our corridor music. But now, if we go into this store, now this store has its very own soundtrack. And if we go back out into the hallway, you'll see that we get a really nice transition because of that fall off radius. We get the attenuation. So the spatialization, we can kind of listen and tell just about where those speakers are. And we're getting that occlusion because we already had it set up. So I'm gonna make you guys sit through all of this, but I am gonna go ahead and do the rest of these stores off camera, and we will be right back. All right, so I've got all of them set up in all of the individual stores, and as you can see, there are a bunch. Looking at my my outliner here, it looks like there's actually 168 of them. So we'll go ahead and take just a small tour of the mall. We'll go in all the different stores so that you can hear how the sound propagates as we walk through the entire mall. And then we'll pull up some of the audio renderer stats and take a look at what is happening performance-wise. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. So we've got our hallway music, our corridor music. And we've got this store. We're going to go back out into our hallway so we get that hallway music again. And so as you can hear, as we go through all of these individual stores, you know, this is all happening from one single MetaSound source that we have different tracks playing, and those tracks are then being spit out through their respective audio buses. And then we have our MetaSound receivers reading that audio bus and playing it with the attenuation and occlusion that we were after. So now, like I mentioned, let's take a look at performance. Because as I mentioned, you know, if you're looking for the best performance, audio volumes are probably going to be your way to go. But if you do have a little bit of performance headroom, I highly recommend trying this out. So we're going to come in here and we're going to look at our audio, our mixer, and our audio threads, just to make sure that we're getting all of our different audio commands here. And there's a couple things that I want you to keep an eye on. And you see that for max channels, we have 32, which means we can only have 32 channels of audio playing at one time. If you exceed that limit, then there are going to be audio assets that either don't get played or get stopped if they are playing. Now you can go into your priority and change what kind of has higher priority, and the engine will do the best it can to keep all of those with the higher priority playing. It's not a guarantee though, because if you hit a channel cap within a priority, you're still going to run into issues. But even though we have 168 of these, because we have all of these set to restart, which basically means it's like calling. So once we're outside of the attenuation radius, this, like for example, this one, as soon as we get out here, it stops. It no longer takes up one of those channels. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. And if I jump out here, see we have 3 audio sources and we're not even touching that 32 channel cap. If we look at our audio or our render audio, we're only calling 2 of them. And that is the 2 that are right above my head. Now you will see these numbers change as we move around. But at no point are we ever touching anywhere near that max channel cap. So while this is a little bit more performance heavy than say using audio volumes, it's still not terrible. Like, you still have plenty of room to add other effects. So say, for example, if I wanted to add effects for this water fountain, if I wanted to add effects to, say, like the bells ringing, like the security ding as you go through here, footsteps, whatever else you may want to fill out your scene with, you still have plenty of room to do that. And again, we have all of the attenuation so it sounds more realistic. We have the occlusion so it sounds more realistic. And so I really just have to say that if you have the performance overhead available, I think this would give your player a much better experience than just using audio volumes. All right, guys, so that is going to wrap things up for this video. But before we go, I did want to mention that while I was making this video, I had taken a break and was scrolling around YouTube, and I noticed that Brian Fuller actually just put out a video on audio buses as well. And if you've not watched any of Brian's videos, I highly recommend it. So you'll see a card that just popped up in the top corner of the screen specifically to the audio bus video that he had just put out. But while you're over there, I highly recommend subscribing and just checking out some of the other amazing content that he's been working on. But that being said, I am going to end this video. Please consider hitting that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you never miss out on any future content. And if you'd like to be a part of the Sound Effects Guy Discord server, you'll find a link in the description below. Until next time.